Since the dawn of democracy, various initiatives have been undertaken to ensure that the public service functions effectively. Across the world, governments are continually seized with the issue of securing high levels of professionalism among their officials. The National School of Government has been tasked with exactly this. It's leading the process of drafting the professionalisation framework. The framework is central to the empowerment of public sector officials and is meant to help assist them become a lot more responsive to the needs of the country. Well, we're joined by Professor Busani Ngcaweni, who is the head of the National School of Government. Professor, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. So we've seen at least now 2 times that the President has mentioned the work of the National School of Government in his State of the Nation address, and he really seems to be pointing to this entity as being what is going to help reshape and capacitate public service workers across the country. Let's talk about what you have been able to do since you were formed.
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks for taking interest in this yourself and the Newzroom Afrika in general. The National School of Government is a very difficult department not to mention at the moment. You have to, if you are interested in what is happening in public affairs, you cannot talk about the work of the National School of Government. It's not a new department, by the way. It's an old department. It has changed its name over the past couple of years. Some know it as a Palama, some know it as a Samdi, so it has existed for many years. However, it's a department that largely was in the background because issues of state capacity were not as prominent as they are today. State capacity is the #1 priority of the 6th administration, and that was very good for the National School of Government in the sense that it suddenly had to be given the responsibility of championing the #1 priority in the medium-term strategic framework. We are doing groundbreaking work, and we are theorizing it in a very basic way. Our argument is public servants, whether they are elected or appointed, must be regarded as pilots and cabin crew members, which means, as a bare minimum, they have an obligation to return to the simulator on regular basis. In aviation, you are obliged to return to the simulator in order to sharpen your ability either to fly an aircraft or to work as a safety officer, which is the responsibility of the people whom we generally regard to be there to serve chicken or beef. That's not their primary responsibility. So our argument is, in order to master statecraft, public servants appointed, which is us as officials, as well as elected, which is all politicians, must return to the simulator, which is the National School of Government, as well as other training interventions, because the complexity of providing a service to South Africans, the complexity of governing a country like South Africa and many others, requires everybody to advance their skills base, to renew their knowledge set, and to understand what are the needs of the people and how can they be served better, especially now that the resources are shrinking, yet the expectations of the public is increasing.
Of course, when it comes to state capacity, when we look at the criticism across the board of public service officials, it's that you have people sometimes that have been placed in positions, not necessarily because they're qualified, but have been able to get those positions as a result of closeness to political power, proximity to certain individuals. And how does the National School of Government then deal in terms of addressing that specific problem, because there's such a great skills mismatch and just lack of capacity when we're talking about the public service more broadly?
Well, look, Kate, that's correct. So it could happen in the newsroom, it could happen anywhere else. Our emphasis is, once you interact with us as a simulator, as a National School of Government, we say, regardless of how you got into that position, because we have no authority to challenge how you got there, it's a responsibility of another department. Regardless of how you got to that position, regardless of the capital you have, whatever mileage you have that resulted in you getting into a position as a mayor, as a director, as a CFO, We then say, what do you need in order for you to effectively implement or deliver the service you are expected to deliver? That is where we come from. Once as an individual and as a group, you recognize that irrespective of how you got there, in order for you to succeed in your responsibility, this is a new knowledge set you require. These are the skills that you require. And then most importantly, the attitude to how you are serving the public matters the most. That is where we intervene. And in some cases, if we can't train you sufficiently, we can refer you for further learning opportunities, because in many cases, we're a small department, we are unable to provide all the requirements of people. We can refer you to other training providers like higher education institutions who can then be able to assist you to close some of the gaps. And it's true, some of the people who go through our gates have got very big knowledge gaps, and you can realize immediately that here you are training someone on how to manage a contract, but the gap is so large that this person may need to go back to school to do other things that as the National School of Government we are unable to provide.